Hi there, this is Ron Rogers, and as promised, I'm going to talk about real life airline aborts. Now, okay, one thing I need to say first off that as an airline captain, 25 years as captain, this picture was taken just before my last takeoff out of Maui, which would have been my last chance for an abort. Fortunately, it did not occur, but in 25 years as captain, I did not ever have to make a high speed abort. And when you combine that with my 37 years total as airline pilot, no aborts in any crew position. Though every once in a while, you take the runway. I took the runway in the 27. You push up the power of the N1 gauge. Goes like that. It's an instrument error. We knew the engine actually had not quit because we could hear it running, but you got to abort. And other times you'd bring up the power and something's not right and you abort. So, you quickly tell everybody, hey, you barely started to roll, but you don't want anybody to get too excited. So you got to tell them, hey, we got a minor problem. We got to go back to the gate. So never had a high speed abort or anything close it that I experienced, but I'm going to talk about some other situations. And this first one is quite interesting, I think. Now, I was jump seating on PanAm. I'm going over to Paris. At the time, United Airlines did not fly Europe at all. So I was doing a flight evaluation on Airbus. Back in the late 80s, I believe. And the only way to get to Paris was on Pan Am, and I ended up going to JFK and getting on one of their flights there. And it was kind of interesting. I was a co-pilot on the 727 at the time, and one of the crew members said, "Don't mention anything to the captain about pay." And I go, "Well, what do you mean?" And I know I'm digressing here. He says, "Well, you're a co-pilot on the 27 for United Airlines. You probably make more money than per hour than the captain does." And I said, "You got to be kidding." He says, "No, it's Pan Am was going down, and they were the pay was bad, and they were on their way out, but." They still had a little bit of time, and I was flying with them on a one of the Dash 100s, a three-man crew, over to Paris. Now, we had pushed back, started taxi out and all this stuff. And we're going to take off on 13 left here at JFK. Now, it's a 14,600 foot long runway. That's an awfully long runway. Well, we start going down the runway, and just as we start to roll, I hear this pop. I'm sitting back there. I'm a a little airplane guy. There's three pilots up front. I didn't say anything, because I figured, well, these guys probably knew what was going on. But a couple seconds later, another Pan Am flight made a radio call. They actually called one of the crew members by name, which is kind of funny. Tight knit group there. But they called one of the crew members by name and told him he had blown a tire. That's what the pop was. Okay, so the captain aborts. Now we have barely just started to move down the runway. I mean, we're not going fast at all. Of course, in a 47, you set up high and speed can be deceptive, but the captain pulls the power back and he just lets the thing roll. He actually picks up the PA as we're slowing on the runway and makes an announcement about, they've had a problem with the aircraft. They're going to have to go back to the gate. So he does an abort, and to me, it was a reasonably low speed abort. I mean, we could have been close to 100 knots. I don't remember at the time, but we weren't roaring down the runway for any reason. But this is where it gets interesting. Okay, because we stop, and we pull off on the runway, and the fire chief is not too excited about this whole thing, and he's not letting us move. Now the yellow arrow, the second officers, I mean, they got buttons and gauges all over the place. That's pretty impressive. I'd been a 27 second officer, but this panel is pretty darn impressive here. And that yellow arrow is pointing to the brake temperature gauges. Okay, there's a little closer picture, the rate temperature gauges. Well, of course, we pull off, and of course, the second officer is kind of looking at that, and everybody's looking at it, and I'm looking at it, and they're down there in the green. That's fine, I mean, oh, that looks great, no problem whatsoever here. We'll probably get this tire fixed. We'll be on our way. Well, the 47, as you probably know, it's got a lot of rubber rollers down there. No, 4 times 4 is 16. That's a lot of rubber rollers down there. Okay, so they're sitting there, and there's a thing that you read about, and it says, well, if you have to apply brakes, it takes a while for the heat to kind of come through the system. Initially you're not going to see temperatures, but as time goes on, the brakes are going, the heat's going to come out of the brakes, it's going to go into the tires and everything, and you're going to get an indication that it's getting warm. Well, the captain is arguing with the fire chief there for a very long time, and he's not letting us move. And he's trying to, come on, I want to go back to the gate, stuff like that. Well, in the process, I'm sitting there and I'm looking up at those gauges. And the little needles are moving up and up. So we're about 7-8 minutes in, and they are solidly in the yellow. And I'm thinking, boy, that's not looking too good at all. I'm not, that's not too good at all. And by the time he finally gets clearance to move, these suckers are coming up into the red. And I guess that's what the fire chief was concerned about, blowing tires in the congested gate area. But they had given us clearance to go, and so we're going. Okay, so the captain is pulling into the gate, and as we come into the gate, we hear a pop, and then another pop, and then another pop. And the aircraft, actually, you can see it looking forward into the terminal gate area. You can actually see the aircraft start to go down just a little bit. We actually lost that few inches, and you could see the aircraft sinking. Well, what happened is we ended up blowing all 16 tires. Yes, and to this day, even with now a lot of experience in big aircraft and flight test, that to me wasn't a high-speed abort. So I don't know how we ended up blowing all the tires, but he sure as heck did. So here we are sitting there, and it's okay. What are we going to do now, guys? This is getting involved here. We gotta, if we're lucky, we got a 16 tire change here, and that's not going well. And my flight to Paris is not looking good at all. So this flight attendant comes up and says, "Hey guys, well, they're gonna, flight's gonna cancel. They're gonna have to, the galleys are all just trash now, essentially, because we're not going anywhere." So she brings up this big, nice little tray of goodies from first class, and we're sitting there munching on them, thinking, well, what are we going to do now? And I'm thinking, well, I'm not getting to Paris tonight. And all of a sudden, the doors, the galley doors on the 47 open up, and the guys come on and says, "Hey, they're moving you to another aircraft. We need to put all these, put the galley back on the aircraft. So you're not getting a new galley. We're just moving this galley." So yeah, we really didn't talk to the flight attendant the rest of the flight, and we figured some poor first class passengers did not get their appropriate appetizers. All right, another instance here, and this was with when I got finally on with United Airlines, and I'm flying with a 37 captain. I'm the co-pilot, and he's telling me this story about how he did this high-speed abort. And I go, well, that's interesting. Well, tell me about it, Captain. So he says, well, we're down at Dallas Fort Worth, and we got loaded up, and we're taxiing out. And we're getting cleared here to take off on 36 right. Now, anybody who knows about Dallas Fort Worth knows it has more runways than God there. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I one time started to line up on the wrong runway coming in because I hadn't totally unfolded my page. This whole page folds out, and I hadn't unfolded, and I didn't notice that there was one other runway out there, and I started to line up on the wrong one, and then I fold the sheet out and go, oh boy. Okay, that's a digression and a confession. But anyway, did land on the correct runway. But anyway, so he lines up on the runway. Okay, he tells me he applies power. He's roaring down the runway, and he gets the V1 call. He gets the VR, the rotate call, and he starts the nose coming up. All of a sudden, the right engine just absolutely comes unglued. Now, it wasn't this bad, but I found this picture and kind of liked it, no, it wasn't this bad, but it made a horrendous bang, and pieces of the engine came out, and he'd already started the nose up, and he aborted. And I go, you aborted after V1? He goes, yep. Oh, the training center didn't like that at all. They go back in, of course, the airplane's not going anywhere. And oh man, he gets called in, gets put on the carpet, and he said, they're going, you aborted above V1. In fact, you had started to rotate. And he goes, well, yes, I did. And he goes, he says, you pay me to make judgments, right? And I go, well, yeah. All right, so they clear him to take off on 3-6 right there, and he goes where that little green arrow is, takes the runway, and he puts the power in. The engines come up, and where the red arrow is about where he had brought the nose up, and the right engine just disintegrated on him. So okay, he's looking off the nose. This is a 13,000-foot long runway. And this was back in the days, we have reduced thrust now where you would end up taking, a good half of the runway because you're at almost idle power on a 13,000-foot runway in a 737-200. You would be at a very low power setting with the way they do it later with reduced thrust. But this was back in the day when everybody used max blast. That was just the way the captains flew. They used max blast. So on a 13,000-foot runway, you'd be airborne in 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet, something like that. So, you waste a lot of runway. It's harder on the engines. That's why reduced thrust is a good idea, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in some videos. But anyway, so he's got this problem, and he's got 10,000 feet of runway left. So he pulls the power back to idle. He lowers the nose, and he starts easily getting on the brakes. And he's getting it down almost a little bit above taxi speed by the time you get to the blue arrow there. He's still only gone halfway down the runway, and he's just about taxi speed. And he decides that, well, wait a minute, my next really decent turnoff here that I can make is up there by the yellow arrow. So he said, I actually had to add power to get off the runway. I explained that to them. They looked at me for a second and said, because their knee-jerk reaction was, you aborted above V1. You do not abort above V1. Well, he had a very good reason for aborting above V1, and they said, yep, that made a lot of sense, especially when you look at the damage of the engine. They said, okay, never mind, no training, you're good, you're gone. Okay, so he goes back to the line, no problem. Well, let me talk to you a little bit about the problem on the 727. I flew all 3 seats in this, and the nice thing about, starting out, I was a line check airman on the 27, and I had 8 years as captain on it. I had a total of 11 years in all 3 seats, but plenty of time as a flight engineer, plenty of time as co-pilot to get to kind of see things, and that's a nice thing to do. The way it's going right now is people have been upgrading rapidly, and you want the time to kind of see what's going on. And one thing I learned about this with the 3-holer was that there was an issue that you could get yourself into trouble on the 3 engines. Now you notice that they're not aligned there. That top one is up high. But if you go to the back of the thing here, you go, well, they all come out equal. Yeah, they come out nice through the center of gravity there, and you get, when you add power, you don't get these pitch ups and stuff like you do on underslung engines without electronic flight controls. But anyway, I digress there. But basically, so you got a little issue with the airflow on that number 2 engine, that center engine not being very well aligned. Well, anybody who flies the 727 or who's flown it very much knows that when you got a crosswind, you can get a compressor stall on that inlet because the air has to come around. It's got to go in the inlet. It goes down. It's got all sorts of chances to get disturbed. So you don't advance above 1.4 EPR. That's basically what you run the engines up. You run them up to about 1.4, let everything stabilize. You get the aircraft rolling, but then you bring that engine up, and you want to get takeoff thrust by 60 knots to meet all the specifications and stuff like that. But basically, the deal is, and people would commonly do this, you'd bring up all 3 engines to 1.4, and then you'd take and with your hand you'd leave that center engine out, and 1 and 3 you would come up and you'd set takeoff thrust, and the airplane would start to roll. As you can see from this little de-icing picture here, that that engine sucks in a lot of air. Obviously they do, but it goes through this little tube here to get down to that number 2 engine. And the interesting thing is that like I said, the nice thing to watch is I saw several people not do this properly, and we would have a good crosswind, and they would cob the power up and pop. That number two engine would go pop. It would compressor stall. You'd get a pop pop stuff like that. But then, okay, it's okay. It would recover right away because it wasn't really any damage other than disturbed airflow. But at least that's what we thought at the time. So the old thing was you'd bring it up, yeah, you get a couple pop pops, and you just keep on going. So I'm going out. I'm the co-pilot. We're going out of Newark. Ah, yes, Newark, one of my favorite airports. Okay, we're going out of Newark. And of course, here again is the diagram of that duct. I think it's kind of interesting. Somebody kind of overlaid the 27 duct with the L1011 duct. But anyway, here's that duct again, and the captain, I was co-pilot, the captain gets a little bit of ham-fisted on the throttles, and we had a decent crosswind, and he brings them up to 1.4, and we start rolling, and he brings them all up, and I'm going, and then pop, we get the pop. Well, there's a little problem with that. The new guidance was that if you get a compressor stall, there could be damage to the engine. So it's not just the thing clears and you continue the takeoff. No, after we got a compressor stall and you go back to the gate. I don't know how many times that I had seen this mostly as an engineer, that the guy popped it there and we kept on going, but you didn't do that anymore. So we ended up going back to the gate. It took about a half hour to check it. There's actually a little a hole that the guy can go in, the mechanic can go in the cabin area and go up and look at the, it's back in the aft stairwell, I think it is, area. He can actually look into the intake of the engine to make sure that blades aren't damaged. But like I said, I absolutely loved flying the 727. Most of them aren't doing quite so well now. They're out of service unless there may be some floating around South America. That's where the airplanes sometimes tend to go, but a lot of them are just mothballed. Great airplane, fun to fly. Those are my stories, experience with airline aborts. I hope you found it interesting. Thanks for watching.